Hey guys, this is Rise, and I'm here with Diggity and Klazart for one more triple commentary, although you probably don't know what order this is being done in because they're going to be uploaded in a completely different order. But we are doing what I would say is the biggest name match of this game. Of this series so far anyway. We got Bisu versus Fantasy. This is my fantasy game, to be honest. Both these players are great. They're both from the same team. It's a Protoss versus Terran game, which I love that matchup, to be honest. And both are at the top of their leagues, the top of their races, respectively. Bisu, I would argue, is the best player, but Fantasy has always surprised us, always brought out some crazy play, and he's made it to the finals on multiple occasions, whereas Bisu has won the finals on multiple occasions. So I'm very excited as we come to this match, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm expecting some good things here. Although I want to give a little background before I pass it off. I just wanted to say that I saw on from John 747 actually, there was a comment about what the coaches said about both of the players, Fantasy and Bisu. And apparently the coach said something like, if Fantasy wins, he's going to win the entire MSL. And then they said, well, what about if Bisu wins? He goes, if Bisu wins, he's going to win the entire MSL. So, I mean, we're seeing the quality of these players through their coach's words there. And that just gives us a great setup for what this match is going to give us.
No disrespect to Hyuk, but I think if Hyuk was playing, I'm sure his coach would be saying, if he wins, he'll be winning the entire MSL. Although, well, maybe not. But I've got to feel a little bit sad here because this is the round of 16, and to see probably the best Protoss player playing right now going up against probably the best Terran player currently playing right now, so early on, it does take a little bit away from the flavor of the competition, and I feel from the potential for some great matchups with these players against other top players, because one of these guys are going to get eliminated so early on, and that truly, to me, is sad. Fantasy, again, is starting up at the 5 o'clock position, Bisu at the 7 o'clock position. This is Byzantium 3. But yeah, these two guys have a mini rivalry going on. This is not the first time they've come up against each other. But Bisu has been struggling a little bit of late, while Fantasy has been in top form. Bisu's had a few high-profile losses. He's not looking as invulnerable as he has been in the past, but he's also played some good games of StarCraft. And I think this game is much more important for Bisu to win, in my opinion, than Fantasy, because I think he's going to struggle more on current form to bounce back in a best of 3 or best of 5 from losing the first game, and both players scouting wrong initially.
Looks like, yeah, both players going to come across each other's base about equivalent timing, depending, I guess, when they come across each other across that top portion of the map and who reacts first. It's not going to be a significant enough difference to really change anything, I think. But yeah, this is Bisu, the old legend, versus Fantasy, the guy who's still trying to prove himself. Fantasy, of course, not taking an OSL championship, still playing at a very high level, really more known for his interesting builds of late, but I still think he's the stronger of the two players right now, at least in this matchup. I would say that Fantasy's versus Protoss is much stronger than Bisu's versus Terran. Not to say that Bisu's, and I've said this in the past, that Bisu's versus Terran is all that bad. It's actually fairly strong, I would say. It's just that's his weakest matchup, and I don't think he can beat the really top tier versus Protoss guys. And I would say that Fantasy is a good enough player where he can take down Bisu most days. Although it's enough of a margin where I think it could go either direction. It looks like Bisu just putting that pylon out to the side to maybe go for some sort of hidden tech. I think he's just going to go for a standard one-gate Reaver harass, at least at this stage. Fantasy leaving his front door open, though. Only going to single factory, getting the engineering bay down. A probe scout looks like it was in the base, but pulling out. It's gonna let the Dragoon and the Zealot do the scouting, and Fantasy might end up falling back to some pressure here, because with that Dragoon and that Zealot, they could wreak some havoc here. At the very least, they should provide some delay on that secondary. It looks like that 5th Marine being produced, the Dragoon misfiring a little bit there, which is always frustrating. But yeah, I really feel like I feel like all the matchups right now are kind of in a weird position, where there's this transition period where nothing's really solid right now. It's particularly Zerg versus Terran, but Protoss versus Terran as well. There's been some new early opening builds with the 6 Marines, which I'm trying to point out right here. Off one factory, you can still put up some decent pressure. Bisu now going for that expansion, and I think in that situation, I feel like Fantasy's going to end up in a little bit more of an advantage, and this is kind of what I was expecting, actually. I should have said it a little bit sooner. It's a 2 SCVs, 6 Marines, and a tank, and what's nice about this for Fantasy is, first of all, he can run up and do a significant amount of damage, maybe even take out the Nexus of Bisu's, but if he decides to turn around and take his command center, he can still do that without too much trouble, and it looks like he is just going to hold up, build his command center. I don't think he's going to press this attack, although he still is in a good position to.
Well, I gotta slightly disagree with you just in terms of when Bisu is on his game, and I always say this about Bisu, he is unbeatable. I honestly believe that nobody can beat Bisu when he is playing his top form. I don't think there is one player in the world right now that can beat Bisu at his top form. That said, Bisu, you're right. He does have a weakness for against Terran, and we saw that when he lost to Mind in the MSL a year or two ago, which was very upsetting to me when I saw that, especially because I've never thought ever since Mind won, before or after, I've never thought that Mind was that great of a player. But it was just like you said, it is his toughest matchup. But either way, I still think that Bisu can certainly pull this out. He's already at least deflected the pressure that was coming off from that 6 Marine plus tank and a couple of SCV rush. And he's got plenty of goons, and he's got range to defend against it if he decides to push in with it. So I don't think Fantasy is going to get too far with it. And now Bisu is actually going for a Shuttle and Templar build, which I got to say I've been seeing a lot of Protoss do lately. And it's with varying success. And I think you're right about the builds these days. There definitely isn't a solid win-all Bisu build, you know, like there used to be against Zerg. Certainly things have kind of clouded up once again where there's not a dominant race. There's not a dominant build. And so it's tough. And we've been seeing that a lot too, actually, that starport with the early Wraith to deal with shuttles. And that's been very effective. And that's been one of those things that just neutralizes anything that the Protoss can throw in terms of shuttle tech, whether it be a Reaver or Templar. So at this point, you know, I don't think either player is in a stronger position than the other. But Fantasy is getting up his natural expansion, and unless Bisu gets up another expansion, obviously eventually he'll fall behind if you follow the Terran wins in the 1-to-1 rule. But Bisu's got a couple of DTs in that shuttle now, so let's see if he can do some damage.
Yeah, interestingly enough, that Wraith heading northwards, I'm not sure why Fantasy sent it in that direction, considering he knows where Bisu's base is and where the shuttle is most likely to come from. And Bisu, interesting enough, going for the DTs. I don't think Fantasy's got a lot to actually defend from this. He's now pulling his units back, but he's not really going to be able to do much against those DTs now in and among his units. He does have vultures, obviously. He's got the spider mines, but Bisu could obviously use that to his advantage, get a very effective drag going, and he's just going to harass Fantasy's economy a little bit here. Spider mines going on all over the place, and Fantasy's forced to pull his SCVs out, but he's pulled his SCVs out relatively quickly from his natural expo, so I don't think he's going to take too much damage to his economy, and now he's able to put spider mines all around that natural expo as well, and unless Bisu can effect some sort of a great mine drag, he's gonna end up losing his DT. One of the DTs goes down as it hammers away at that CC, so Bisu's harass not really very effective. You really need those DTs to do a lot of damage to pay for themselves. I think he would have been almost better off if he had High Templar in there, because I think he would have had time, but obviously he wouldn't have had time to get the energy up for a storm perhaps. Bisu now going with the Stargate meanwhile, and that's the great thing about putting that starport down for Terran players, because generally a starport isn't in the natural order, and Bisu trying to sneak those vultures through almost sneaks through, but sorry, Fantasy trying to sneak those vultures through almost sneaks through, but Bisu holds them in time. But normally a starport isn't part of a natural build for Terran players, but with going for that Wraith, not only does the Wraith give them the defensive advantage, but they put the control tower down, and now they've got the dropship to do some excellent harass, and I think that really helps Terran players a lot, and I think that's why we're seeing this build more and more, because it allows for so much adaptability and flexibility, and Bisu just gonna have to defend against, and Bisu takes that dropship down, perfect by Bisu, perfect defending, takes absolutely no damage from the dropship, and meanwhile his Arbiter Tribunal going down as well, so Bisu is really playing well in this game, but Fantasy is not behind by any means.
This has been extremely popular as of late, doing the 2-base Arbiter, very quick tech to Arbiter, and then just putting up the pressure and going, basically macroing up from there. The standard counter I've seen from most Terrans is just to play Camper, go for a lot of upgrades early, but that's not what I'm seeing out of Fantasy. Usually if you're doing that, you don't go for that starport first. Looks like he is just going to take a 3rd base, and probably, let's see what he's going to be up to after this. He is taking a slight economic edge, at least at this portion of the game. I gotta say I like Wraith coming into play into the mid-game. I've really been a big proponent of that ever since Mind actually took that that game against Bisu. And it looks like a couple vultures able to sneak through, taking a couple hits on the way. Going to plant some mines along that that gate line, but I don't think they're going to be able to get a lot done before the Dragoons are flooding in. It looks like they're going to get 1 or 2 probe kills, but they're not going to get much beyond that. So pretty solid defense, actually getting 3 kills there. Pretty solid defense by Bisu, minimizing losses there. Still, whenever a vulture sneaks through, it's just frustrating, but a tank way out in the open. I'm not sure if that tank got picked off or not. Okay, it looks like it did manage to wander its way back home. Coming back to that Wraith, though, you can almost treat it like a Corsair. that's just even better at anti-air. You can take down that shuttle, you can use it to scout, you can use it for spotting later in the game. If you just kind of want to move through and kind of get a good look at what's inside your opponent's base, you can do that as long as you're careful with the Dragoons. The one thing I haven't seen Protoss do to kind of adjust with that is with their shuttle, with their Dark Templar, throw a Dragoon in there to help protect it, because Wraith, especially with that cloaking upgrade, very vulnerable against even a single Dragoon. It looks like Fantasy has managed to take that third base without too much trouble. Bisu at 4 gates. He's already got that Arbiter building. And it looks like Bisu's going to try to hold this with just a little bit of tech. I think he's actually going to be okay with troop count, though. Usually at this position, you'll see, at least what I've seen in the past, is Terran actually being up as far as troop count, and then that Arbiter having to be, oh, this is going to be close, actually. Okay, there's that gateway to block off that ramp just in time away from those vultures. They're going to end up killing that probe, but not affecting much more damage. But Bisu isn't really going to need that Arbiter this mid-game. Let's see if, ooh, they're going to catch a couple of these probes in transition. Very nice timing by Fantasy. I've got to say, just right on top of that gateway now being canceled, another 2 pylons being placed to allow the Zealots to flow through. But yeah, the question is now, who's going to end up taking their 4th base, how quickly, and how much damage will they take on the way there? Byzantium, you can hold. That 9 o'clock becomes difficult to hold. Bisu does have that 9 o'clock. He's going to be spread out. He's only going to have a single Arbiter defend both locations. Fantasy has that cliffside edge. It's a little bit easier to defend for him. But if Fantasy, I think it's kind of on him to do the maneuver here. Bisu's already kind of played out. Either he's going to go for an additional base, or he's going to push into Bisu at this stage. I'm kind of curious what he's going to do. I don't really feel like he's committed one or the other. At least I haven't seen the additional factories plopped down at this stage. For the moment, it looks like he's just going to go for a standard I'm going to out-macro him game over the long term.
Where the hell is all Fantasy's units? Can someone tell me? Because I've seen 6 tanks and like 6 vultures, and the vultures are out on the field, and the tanks are in a static formation with the exception of whatever's in that dropship. And right now, I gotta say, I do feel like Bisu is on top of his game. Fantasy, though, doing a good job over here, putting together a very effective little attack. But Bisu is on top of it, drops his shuttle. He's got some Zealots in it. He's gonna take down those vultures. He's got to watch out for a Mind Dragon to his probes. He's got the Arbiter there as well to cloak things. So he's either gonna force Fantasy to back off or to waste a scan. It looks like he does back off. That dropship is heavily damaged, and Bisu appears to be the one to get that 4th base first. And now, if Bisu can get that 4th base, I think he's going to start pulling ahead, because really, Fantasy has lost a lot of units here without doing enough damage, in my opinion. He's got that dropship still with a couple of units in it, but really he just hasn't done enough with it to really make it worth it, especially if he's going to lose it. The Arbiter, though, doesn't focus on it. Bisu clearing out the mines with a single Zealot, which I would actually argue is very worth it to clear him out quickly. And Fantasy, I almost feel like he's stalling, and I'd like to go back to his base. Diggity, you touched on it before. He didn't have that many factories, and now it looks like he's finally putting down, what, his 4th factory? So I feel like he's really behind in unit production here. Bisu, he's got a couple of groups of goons, but he's got that Arbiter. He's got that big tech unit, and that can go a long way. He's got to be careful. Oh man, he's got to be careful of those spider mines. Not really. Wow, that Dragoon not going down, even though it took all those hits. And Bisu is now putting on the pressure. And Fantasy, I'll be honest, I don't know if he's prepared to deal with this. There are 2 Arbiters out. He's got a ton of Zealots, and Fantasy's not doing anything. He's not doing enough damage. He's not been successful in doing any damage. And if he doesn't soon, or at least get more units out on the field, and look at him. He is trying to defend a huge position here. Bisu could just go in on one end and take out a few units and then go in the other. Although they're showing Fantasy does have +1 weapons upgrades, which is nice, but I don't know if that's going to be enough against what Bisu has.
Yeah, the critical thing is that Bisu didn't have a lot of Zealots, and that's what he was waiting for. Now those Zealots have come into play, and it looks like he might be willing to make a move here at that expo just north of the 6 o'clock position. And you're right, Bisu doesn't really have anything to defend. He doesn't even have spider mines in front of those siege tanks. He has a couple of spider mines, but those Dragoons are going to be able to clear that out, and Fantasy's going to get right within range of it. He does have, I think he got an EMP off there on those Arbiters, but he's managed to get a stasis off on a bunch of siege tanks, and this is going to be horrible for Fantasy right now. Bisu's just streaming in, a couple of Goliaths trying to focus in on the Arbiters, but Bisu's got such a massive army, and another stasis goes off on a bunch of vultures, and Bisu's just going to run right through this expansion. Those siege tanks just on the south of the ridge coming into play a little bit. sorry, just north of that north ridge coming into play a little bit, firing away, but those zealots are going to absorb the damage from that siege tank. One zealot managing to close in there, and another siege tank gets taken out, and Fantasy is going to lose that expansion, and he's going to lose all of those stasis units as well. He's trying to bring a couple more siege tanks up from his natural expo to try and shell those dragoons, to try and force them back and save some of those stasis units, but he's going to really struggle to do that. Bisu just coming in with the arbiters, and Bisu is just completely dominated Fantasy right now, and the siege tank gets taken down, and Bisu is now breathing, and Bisu continues to apply the pressure, and now just forcing his way down that natural expo, and Bisu Fantasy's in huge trouble right now. And I've got to say that in my opinion, this whole game is hinged on that one dropship snipe that Bisu did early on, and then of course his effective defense against the second dropship from Fantasy, and I think that's what's allowed Bisu to get so far ahead, that he's got such overwhelming weight of numbers, and the arbiters, he's just using them perfectly. Another great stasis, and now Bisu's blocked from bringing reinforcements in. This has got to be GG to Bisu.
That is one disadvantage of going for that starport early, and it looks like, wow, Bisu just all over that expansion right there, that natural expansion. He's probably going to be able to take that out, and if he does, oh, Mind Drag killing a lot of SCVs. I think he's going to get that command center picked off out of the air as well. But that is one disadvantage of the starport. It delays your additional expansions, especially if you're going drop. That's additional troops, that's gas not going to tanks, that's gas not going to a ground force. For a minute there, though, I have to say, despite having the starport, despite going for drop, I felt like Fantasy was a little bit, not befuddled, but he didn't know where to go next. He just looks like he's going to get a drop in the upper left-hand corner. I think I think that Bisu can afford to lose a base here, though, especially after taking out that natural expansion. It looks like he's just going to continue to pummel down into the main. He's got some arbiters above head, and I think that mines are it for detection right there. Not seeing a okay, there's a science vessel wandering up, but still, I think I see 3 arbiters up in the air. Bisu can definitely lose this expansion in the upper left, and he's going to have no problem just wandering in and taking out all the factories. Fantasy's been at just 4 factories this entire game. He didn't build additional command centers until very late. It just seemed like there was a moment there where he had paused for thought, didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, kind of went for a half-hearted drop, and then didn't really commit to that either. It was just a single drop ship, maybe a couple vultures. Maybe if he had taken out the command center with that attack, he would have been able to do something, but I really don't see that. That just seems like a silly plan to me. I'm going to take out a command center with a couple of vultures and 2 tanks versus Bisu at close position across the map, at catty corner across the map. I don't know, it just felt like there was a moment there where he didn't know what to do, he didn't know how to react, and as a result, he's going to end up losing this game.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and I think that this drop, and that's GG. I was going to say, as soon as he loses those tanks, that's going to be it, and that is it, and Bisu wins this in a ridiculous fashion, just destroying his teammate there, and I don't know, I actually feel a little bad for Fantasy because he just got face stomped, man. I mean, that was absurd. Bisu really didn't lose anything that entire game, with the exception of maybe a few probes and maybe, I don't know, a couple of Dark Templar. And Fantasy, you're right, he totally played the macro game. He was trying to get ahead, but Bisu had an army, and you know, Bisu's army beat Fantasy's SCVs basically because they didn't do too much, with the exception of I don't know, a couple attacks that he held off pretty well. After that, that was it, and Bisu just rolled them over. So GG, and well played by Bisu.
Yeah, great game of StarCraft Bisu. I think it was again all down to that first dropship getting sniped, because he didn't do any harassment with that. He lost the dropship with I think 4 vultures in it, and that was a huge loss that early on in the game. And it took him a while to get that second dropship out, and I think that's where he kind of got stuck, as Diggity said, where he was trying to decide what to do, and in the end he decided to put that second dropship out and hope that it worked out for him, but then it didn't, and he was just so far behind after that.
Yeah, it just seemed like there was a moment where he kept the factories low. He didn't really dedicate a lot with that drop, and then in the meantime he wasn't producing siege tanks or other units, and then he was delayed on his command center on top of that, and then yeah, it's like and then. Just didn't seem like he had a clear game plan after that initial rush. It's like, I'm going to take my secondary, and then I'm going to have a Wraith out to counter some drop, because I know Bisu's going to try something like that, and ... and it just felt like he was just kind of floundering from that point on, which is what surprises me, because Fantasy's usually the guy that's right on top of that. He's usually the guy with the game plan, he's the guy with the build, he's the guy with the creativity. Not to say that Bisu isn't, but that's what he's known for. I mean, it's the Fantasy build, you know. It's so I don't know. I was very surprised by the outcome of that game, but looking well for Bisu, and this could be the match that gives him the confidence to take down another title.
Yeah, Bisu didn't Bisu didn't fall for the illusion. No, you're all right, Rise. Yeah, Bisu didn't fall for the illusion there. He knew that the Emperor's new prodigy doesn't have any clothes, and now he's got the evidence to prove it.
Oh, man, Klazart had something good to say, too. All right, I'll see you guys in the next commentary. Hope you enjoyed. GG!